Going into part 2 of Brown Mogotsi's testimony today, this is essentially what happened after lunch. Now, part 1, Brown exposed the spy games, the secret tenders, and the CIA allegations. If you have not listened to part 1, go and listen below. I will pin it. Because we are getting into part 2 where Brown's entire story falls apart. Because this time, Brown Mogotsi says he was supposed to, or he wanted to testify in secret because he wanted to remain hidden, anonymous, protected. But when General Mchunu stood in front of the cameras on July the 6th and called him out by names, Brown claims that his entire cover was blown in that single moment. He says that, the world knows exactly who I am. No one will ever give me information again. My whole career of over 400 sources is blown. But let's just talk about this for a second. The commission has been very accommodating of people who are in perhaps crime intelligence positions. We know that they've allowed a lot of people to testify anonymously. Remember, witness X, witness A, witness B, witness C, they have all been protected witnesses. So the fact that the commission called him to testify in front of them today under Brown Mogotsi speaks a lot, because they didn't shield him, they didn't make him anonymous. They put him out in the open. Why? Because I do not think that the commission accepts that he ever acted as a legitimate undercover contact for crime intelligence. And remember, there's only one man who can confirm this, and he is dead. Lieutenant General Sindili Mfazi, from those COVID-19 complications in 2021. And this is a lot about what's happening with Brown's testimony, is that it's a lot of people who have passed on. So for example, Nathi Mthethwa was brought up in part 1, and they can't speak from the grave. They can't defend themselves. So it's easy to lay all these allegations conveniently at people who have passed on. Now, tonight we are going to break down every contradiction, every message, every lie, and every strategic manipulation that Mogotsi used to make himself appear powerful to the cat, to Mchunu, to the minister, and to the country. So on the 31st of December 2024, Senzo Mchunu, dedicated police minister, was, while the rest of us were busy partying, we're celebrating the new year, he was writing a letter and signing it, disbanding the political killings task team, because he wanted to save us South African taxpayers money, even though the task team had approved funding until March of this year. But here's the twist. Brown got a hold of that letter and sent it on to the cat. But Brown claims that he didn't get it from any insider. No. He saw it on social media. He downloaded it, he saved it, and then he used it like a weapon. He showed it to the cat as proof that he had access to top secret SAPS documents. Because remember, Brown wants us to believe that he was investigating the cat for that irregular tender, which we are going to get to now, which he contradicts himself with, as well as he was investigating General Mchunu over these allegations or suspicions that he was a CIA operative protecting Western interests. Now, we got to talk a little bit about what he said about the cat. He said that the cat didn't know that that letter was already all over social media, that it was already public. And Brown knew exactly what he was doing, because he wanted the cat to believe, I have inside information. I am close to the minister. I'm plugged into crime intelligence. But none of that, according to him, was true. Now, Brown admits openly that he tried to create the impression that he had a personal connection to Minister Senzo Mchunu, but in fact he did not. That he tried to create the impression that he was working with him and that he was close, because he was busy also investigating General Mchunu, and that is the reason why he told him that he was with the minister in the Siki, but in fact he was not. This wasn't any intelligence work. It was social engineering, basically a confidence game. He built a fictional version of himself. Remember in part 1 when he said he made this whole legend of himself, and he's had to create basically a whole new identity. And he even claims that he has 400 sources in a secret network, 400 that were giving him information. But the commission is basically, from the questions that they have been asking today, there is not a shred of evidence that he was ever an undercover operative. July the 4th, 2 days before the famous press conference, Brown messaged Mchunu and said, "Congratulations, you are going to save the country." Because according to him, he knew that Mchunu was planning something really dramatic. He believed that he was going to resign in protest over Khumalo's arrests. And he said that, you know what, Mchunu was upset because Khumalo had been arrested. Remember those charges, we went over them. They basically, in my opinion, trumped up charges. The person who was hired is quite qualified, very qualified for the job, has a mechatronics degree. And instead, Mchunu went public. And according to Brown, Mchunu accidentally exposed him, blew his cover. 20 years of intelligence work down the drain because suddenly everything Brown claimed to be secret agent, undercover operative, ghost contact was no longer undercover, no longer covert. But here's the problem. If his cover was blown on July the 6th, why has Brown continued to be such an outspoken member? You know, he was always described as a businessman from the Northwest. In addition, he was also described as someone, you know, who was very outgoing. And we know that he went to go and give an interview to the Sunday World, explaining all these claims that he made. And the Sunday World is also exactly the same paper in which that PKTT report was leaked to. Remember, painting the PKTT in a negative light, that audit that was leaked to them. And remember, there were only 4 people who had access to the audit: Msepe, her PA, Sabia's PA, and Sabia. And 3 of them claim that they didn't leak it and had their computers willing to be examined, but one person, Sabia, did not. So that's just something interesting to keep in mind. And remember, with his assassination attempt that should have technically killed him, remember we saw that footage of the ballistics, and that if someone had been driving that car, when it allegedly had been shot at, then that person wouldn't have been able to survive. Remember the same one where Brown was allegedly mysteriously dropped off after the car was shot at? I wonder if he had some tomato sauce or some ketchup in his pockets that he was going to smear somewhere. I don't know. But what we do know is Brown is someone who is clearly not afraid of media attention. He was telling people, "I'm Brown, I'm in the news," who were pulling up at the side. And remember, those people, they phoned the police, and the police didn't even believe that Brown was being shot at. This assassination attempt happened a few hours after the Madlanga Commission had contacted Brown in order to arrange his appearance. So I wonder if that has anything to do with it. We have to talk a little bit about the New Year's Eve messages. So Brown sends cat messages. There is hope. Today is D-Day. You must stand back for your safety. But under questioning, Brown admits that the safety warning wasn't about intelligence. He just thought the PKTT, who he calls a police mafia cartel, remember he said that General Mchunu has been using the PKTT to further his own CIA Western-driven operative decisions that he has been put up by, might return to harass the cat. And the D-Day message, that wasn't about political strategy or money. It was just about the deadline for CAT to pay 150,000 Rand for the ANC 8th January celebrations. And the ANC so far has done everything they can to distance themselves from Brown Mogotsi. We know that they released a report saying that his membership has been expired, among other things. And that is a lot of distance that is currently being put up by the ANC. I don't think they want anything to do with Brown Mogotsi after everything that is coming up. It admits to fabricating messages, which I find is pretty bizarre. So on New Year's Day 2025, to put in context, the day before, Mchunu had signed that letter of disbandment of the political killings task team, and Mogotsi had sent the cat a message basically saying that that task team that came to your house, remember that famous message, they won't worry you anymore because they have been disbanded. And that is the same one that Mogotsi is claiming that he grabbed off social media and doctored. He didn't get that from anyone inside Sabia, no one. No, he got that from social media. Now, hours before that, Mogotsi had told the cat that he had arranged a meeting for Sabia and the minister. And then there was another mysterious text that said, must have a solution. Now, Mogotsi denies that he ever sent this message. He said it's easily fabricated. And he denied sending this message to Kat, and he doubled down on this. Double down and say, it's so easy to fabricate screenshots, AI, all of these things happening these days. And someone in the commission was quick to point out that these records are from call logs that have been from phones that have been downloaded. They are not screenshots. And Mogotsi, he stood by his denial. He said, I did not send that message. It came from someone, but it did not come from me, or it's fake news. I also have to talk about another one of Mogotsi's messages that he sent on to the cat, saying, as we speak, they are bringing the dockets to Sabia. Now, how would he know that? Because remember yesterday we had General Mutsepe who testified, and she's the one who actually ended up receiving those dockets. And she herself was unsure of when the dockets were coming, how they were coming, what to do with them. But Brown Mogotsi seems to know a lot. And he said that he made this statement based on his perception, not on any real information, on his perception, because he is apparently also psychic. He can tell what is going to happen to all these 121 dockets. How did he even know about the 121 dockets in the first place? I mean, this is what he wants us to believe. And this is the same man who put his hand up and said that he is going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Pressed on this issue, Mogotsi eventually concedes and said that he heard it from his handler, that the dockets in the country, that they were in Sabia's charge. And that he was still acting on this confidence game with Cat and Fala, because he was saying basically to show the cat that I'm in charge, and then when I speak to my target that I'm in charge of what I'm doing, because I'm investigating this tender fraud that is happening in the cat. Because remember, Brown Mogotsi, he is a patriotic man. He paid for his own trip into Kenya to speak to George, and he didn't claim any of that back. He paid the Uber driver 1,000 Rand, which he didn't claim back, to see where Cat's whereabouts are. And he is simultaneously investigating General Nkabinde as well as Cat together. This is a really impressive man. Brown Mogotsi, the 20th of July, Mogotsi gave an interview to the Sunday World. I'll link it below. You can go read it yourself if you want. I'll just summarize it in brief. He basically said that he was an undercover police operative, and that he was the one that went to Tanzania to go and be part of Thabo Besta's arrest. Remember Thabo Besta, who got the best of us? We thought that he was dead. Meanwhile, he was in Tanzania with Dr. Nandipa. Whenever we've seen name drops that come out in the Madlanga Commission, we've seen some characters, they go straight to the media in order to give their own version of events. And remember, General Mchunu warned them. He said that if you go to the media, then I'll bring receipts, which is essentially what happened with Stuart James Sharnek, which we covered last week on the channel. And that is Mchunu's warning, because Mchunu has done all his research in. Now, according to Mogotsi, he also had a lot of conversations with another channel favorite who we've covered, which is Nkabinde, for the Madlanga Commission. He appeared before the Parliamentary Post Hoc Commission last week. He was basically sent packing for either being incompetent or for misleading the commission. We don't know if it was both, or if he was doing it on purpose, or if he was incompetent. We don't know, perhaps both. But he says that when he was unable to reach Mchunu, he was talking to Nkabinde. And basically that when he was talking to Mchunu, it was about arranging ANC meetings in the Northwest. And this is ANC stuff. It's got nothing to do with the cat. It is simply ANC stuff. We know that the ANC has been distancing themselves from Brown. We also know that Senzo Mchunu himself has also been distancing himself from Brown, saying that Brown is not my associate. And when asked if he has a direct line to Senzo Mchunu, then Brown Mogotsi would say, yes, I do. I do have a direct line. Brown dropped another man, that of businessman Suliman Karri-Ann, who is flagged allegedly in a crime intelligence report as one of Kat's associates. Now, Karrim told Brown that he had invested 10 million rand in Kat's healthcare company, that same one that got the 360 million rand tender from the police. And according to the documents that he was shown, this looked legitimate. And this contradicts Brown's original statements where he claimed that the tender was irregular and that he had investigated Kat because he suspected corruption. And like I said, this is something that we're going to probably be seeing a lot of in his testimony, as all these contradictions that are already starting to leak out. So was this investigation that Brown was doing real or fake? Comment below. I don't know if anyone is believing it at this point, to be honest. And it seems as though Brown's story changes depending on who he's talking to. We know that screenshots are being dropped everywhere, and that some of these are faked. The ones that suit his narrative are real, but the ones that aren't, he denies sending. They could be faked. About the messages between him and the minister. And we got to talk around the timeline that this was happening. So this was happening just before the disbandment of the PKTT. And Brown wants you to think that they're talking about illegal mining operations in Stilfontein. That is what Brown wants you to believe, because we got to look at the timeline for things like this. So we see that there's a message from Senzo Mchunu to Brown saying, please update. And like I said, Brown claims this was over the illegal mining operations that were happening in Stilfontein. He says he's from the Northwest. He knows a lot about community leaders. This has nothing to do with him being the alleged go-between between the minister and Kat. And when asked why the minister would want to get operational updates from him, he says it was basically, he says, I was a leader in the community. I was familiar with the community leaders. And then when the 23rd of December, there is a message, we've got a breakthrough. Now, Brown says that he cannot remember what that refers to. And we got to talk a little bit about this constitutional act against Khumalo. So there was this excitement, there was this exchange of messages saying that we've got a breakthrough and that there was a Khumalo who was being charged in the Concords. But this Khumalo is not General Dumisani Khumalo, who, what is they believe they are referring to. It is actually a Brigadier Khumalo. So we got to talk a little bit about these cases that are being brought against General Khumalo, because messages later on will say we have to deal with the Khumalo and the Mkhonasi problem. So was these messages that were being exchanged with regards to that constitutional court ruling, were those messages being exchanged because of Khumalo? Because they thought perhaps they had information on General Dumisani Khumalo. Meanwhile, it was mistaken. It was actually with regards to someone on the name of Brigadier Khumalo. And we've also got to talk about the fact that Khumalo appears to have had a target on his back, because he was then targeted with the appointment of the BMW employee. They like to downplay her role and her degrees, but she actually has a mechatronics degree. And in my opinion, she was very qualified for the post. I misspoke about it before, but I've corrected the narrative since then. She's very qualified for the post that she was appointed to. So it just makes me think that people were gunning for Khumalo in order to get him away from the crime intelligence, in order to get him away from the officers. Remember, we have all that testimony about him not being allowed to go back to the offices that we spoke about previously, which is weird because we have cases where people are out on bail all the time and they're allowed to go back to their offices. And this is not a labor complaint which would prevent someone from going back to their offices. He is charged with fraud and I think falsifying documents. So it's weird circumstances surrounding this. In relation to the text messages where he says Sabia, where he says that he wants to meet with Sabia and Nkabinde in order to finalize the Mkhonasi and Khumalo matters. Well, the reason that I suspect these messages were sent were in order to have a meeting on how to deal with General Mchunu and how to deal with Khumalo, because essentially they were sort of, asking questions at this time about the PKTT. Remember, General Mchunu was trying to get a meeting with Cyril Ramaphosa. He was asking all the questions. These were the two that were fighting the most not to disband the PKTT. And the reason now Mogotsi says that he wanted to meet about this was because he wanted to establish why, according to him, General Mchunu had a problem with him. And he says that this meeting with Sabia and Nkabinde never happened. I don't know if I believe that. Mogotsi has ended his testimony for the day, and he will continue telling his part of his story tomorrow. And the advocates on the commission have made it clear that they will hold off on questioning until they have given him time to tell his side of the story. But for the most part, explosive allegations have come out today, mainly that General Mchunu is an alleged CIA operative who was working with the Zulu King in order to win a succession war. I don't know why the CIA would want to be involved with that, but anyway, Israel was name dropped. Everyone was name dropped. And Brown Mogotsi, he is definitely someone who, is a controversial figure at the moment. He is hot off the press for that alleged assassination, that attempt on his life. And it makes me think that there is a reason why that assassination attempt happened hours after the Madlanga Commission allegedly contacted him. Because you know what? Brown Mogotsi has had to come and explain himself to South African, and I don't think that he's been doing a very good job. What do you think? Comment below.